You thought spiritual awakening would set you on fire. Instead, it left you feeling like a ghost of your former self. You're not alone, and you're definitely not broken. What you're experiencing right now is something that 90% of awakened people go through but nobody talks about. It's the dark secret of spiritual growth that the Instagram gurus conveniently skip over. Here's the brutal truth. Awakening doesn't make you superhuman. It makes you human for the first time. And being truly human means walking through a psychological death that most people avoid at all costs. You've seen through the illusion, cracked the code, understood the game, and now you can't bring yourself to play anymore. Your old goals feel meaningless. Your 5-year plans collect dust. That burning ambition? Gone. But what if I told you this isn't the end of your story? It's the beginning of the most important chapter you'll ever write. What if this motivational death is actually the greatest spiritual upgrade you've ever received? Today we're diving deep into why your soul hit the pause button and how this sacred void might be the key to unlocking a life that actually makes sense. Buckle up, this is going to change everything you thought you knew about motivation and awakening. The Great Collapse, why your old motivation system died. Let me paint you a picture that's probably hitting way too close to home right now. You wake up and that familiar fire that used to drive you through your day? It's not there. The goals that once consumed your thoughts feel like someone else's dreams. You stare at your vision board from last year and feel absolutely nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just a weird, hollow emptiness where your ambition used to live. Welcome to the aftermath of spiritual awakening, American style. We live in a culture that worships productivity, celebrates the grind, and measures worth by achievement. But awakening just pulled the rug out from under that entire system, and now you're standing in the rubble wondering what the hell happened. Here's what nobody prepared you for. Spiritual awakening doesn't just change your perspective, it completely dismantles your motivational operating system. For years, maybe decades, you were running on ego fuel. You wanted to be seen, to succeed, to prove yourself worthy. That's not shallow, that's human development 101. We all start there. But awakening is like suddenly seeing the matrix code behind everything you thought was real. You realize the game you've been playing so hard to win? It's rigged. The prizes you've been chasing? They're hollow. The version of success society sold you? It's designed to keep you hungry but never satisfied. Marcus Aurelius, the ancient Roman philosopher-emperor, understood this collapse intimately. He wrote about the moment when external achievements lose their grip on your soul. He realized that true power isn't about conquering others, it's about mastering yourself. But he also knew that this realization comes with a price. The death of everything you thought mattered. Your ego isn't evil, it's just confused. Imagine you've been following a GPS for your entire life, and suddenly someone tells you it's been taking you to the wrong destination this whole time. You'd feel lost, wouldn't you? That's exactly what's happening to your motivational system right now. The American dream promised you that if you worked hard enough, achieved enough, accumulated enough, you'd find happiness and meaning. But awakening revealed the truth. External achievement is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it never gets full. So your psyche did what any intelligent system would do, it shut down the faulty program. Your soul essentially said, we're not playing this game anymore. We need to find a different way. And that's why you feel so unmotivated. You're not broken, you're between operating systems. This is where most people panic. They try to force the old motivation back online. They read more self-help books, attend more seminars, create more vision boards. But it's like trying to start a car with sugar in the gas tank. The fuel source is contaminated. The really wild part? This motivational death isn't happening to weak people. It's happening to the strongest, most awakened souls on the planet. You had to be incredibly sensitive and aware to see through the illusion in the first place. Most people never question the game, they just keep playing it until they die. But you saw something deeper. You recognized that there's more to life than climbing ladders that lean against the wrong walls. You intuited that true fulfillment doesn't come from external validation or material success. And your soul is refusing to accept anything less than authentic meaning. The problem is, American culture doesn't have a roadmap for this phase. We don't have elders who understand this transition. We don't have rituals to mark this passage. We just have productivity podcasts and hustle culture, neither of which can help you now. So you're floating in this weird space between who you were and who you're becoming. The old you is dead, but the new you hasn't been born yet. You're in the cocoon, dissolved into spiritual soup, wondering if you'll ever feel motivated again. Here's what I want you to understand. This isn't failure. This is transformation. And the fact that you're going through this means you're exactly where you need to be. The motivation will return, but it's going to be completely different from anything you've experienced before. The sacred void, understanding your psychological death. Right now, you're living in what feels like the most boring spiritual experience possible. There are no angels singing, no profound insights hitting you like lightning bolts, no cosmic downloads that change everything overnight. Instead, you're dealing with something way less Instagram-worthy but infinitely more important. Psychological death. Let me be brutally honest with you about what's really happening. You're not just having a bad month or going through a phase. You're experiencing what Marcus Aurelius called the Great Dissolution, the moment when everything you built your identity on crumbles, leaving you face to face with the raw essence of who you really are underneath all the masks. This isn't depression, though it might feel similar. Depression says, nothing matters and nothing will ever change. What you're experiencing says, the old things that mattered were illusions, and I'm waiting to discover what actually does matter. That's a completely different energy, even though both can leave you staring at the ceiling wondering what the point is. In ancient traditions, this phase was considered sacred. Indigenous cultures had vision quests, where young people would go into the wilderness alone until their old identity died and their true purpose revealed itself. Medieval mystics talked about the dark night of the soul. Eastern philosophies describe it as ego death before enlightenment. But here in America, we've pathologized this process. We've turned one of the most important spiritual initiations into a mental health crisis. We medicate it, therapize it, try to fix it with life coaches and motivational speakers. We've forgotten that sometimes you have to fall apart before you can come together in a more authentic way. The void you're experiencing isn't empty, it's pregnant with possibility. Think about it like this. When you delete a file on your computer, the space doesn't stay empty. It becomes available for something new, something better suited to your current needs. Your psyche is doing the same thing right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this process in his personal journals, which we now know as meditations. He understood that becoming your true self requires letting go of all the false selves you've accumulated along the way. But he also knew this letting go feels like death because in a very real sense, it is. You're mourning versions of yourself that no longer serve you. You're grieving dreams that were never really yours to begin with. You're saying goodbye to goals that were programmed into you by parents, teachers, society, and media before you were old enough to choose for yourself. This is why the void feels so disorienting. You spent decades building a life around being a certain type of person, achieving certain types of things, wanting certain types of experiences. Now that person is gone, and the new person hasn't fully emerged yet. You're literally between identities. The American way is to rush through this process. We want to skip the death and get straight to the resurrection. We want to hack our way to enlightenment, find the shortcut to authentic living, download the new operating system without going through the necessary downtime. But consciousness doesn't work like that. You can't think your way out of this phase or positive affirmation your way through it. You have to feel it, live it, breathe it. You have to let the old you die completely before the new you can be born. This is where most people get stuck. They try to resurrect their old motivation, patch up their ego, and get back in the game. They convince themselves that awakening was just a phase, that they need to be realistic, and focus on practical things like career advancement and financial security. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. Once you've glimpsed the truth about the game, you can never fully play it the same way again. Trying to go backwards is like trying to convince yourself that a movie is real after you've seen the cameras and the green screen. The void is teaching you something crucial. You don't need external validation to exist. You don't need achievement to have value. You don't need to be constantly doing something to be worthy of love and respect. These are radical concepts in a culture that equates human worth with human productivity. The ego in crisis, why your inner GPS stopped working. Your ego is having a full-blown identity crisis right now, and honestly, it has every right to panic. For your entire life up until this point, your ego has been the CEO of your personal corporation. It made the big decisions, set the goals, determined what success looked like, and kept you motivated to achieve it. Then awakening happened, and suddenly it's like the board of directors voted it out of office without warning. But here's what most people misunderstand about this process. Your ego isn't the villain in this story. It's more like a GPS system that's been working perfectly for years, until suddenly you decided to take a completely different route that's not on any of its maps. The ego is just trying to do its job, but it literally doesn't have the data to guide you where you're going now. Think about it from your ego's perspective for a minute. It spent decades learning the rules of the game. Work hard, achieve goals, accumulate success markers, build a reputation, create security. It studied American culture like a foreign language, mastering concepts like networking, personal branding, and climbing the corporate ladder. It understood that love comes through achievement, that worth is earned through productivity, and that happiness is purchased through the accumulation of stuff and status. Your ego became really, really good at this game. It learned how to motivate you with fear of failure, excitement about success, comparison with others, and the promise of future satisfaction. It created elaborate vision boards, 5-year plans, and bucket lists. It kept you hustling, grinding, pushing forward even when you were exhausted because it genuinely believed this was the path to fulfillment. Then awakening hit like a spiritual earthquake, and everything your ego thought it knew about life got turned upside down. Suddenly, the external validation it worked so hard to secure feels hollow. The achievements it's so proud of seem meaningless. The future plans it carefully crafted feel irrelevant. The whole framework it used to navigate life has been revealed as a kind of collective hallucination. Marcus Aurelius understood this ego crisis intimately. As the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, he had achieved everything the ego could possibly want: wealth, power, respect, legacy. But he realized that none of these external accomplishments could touch the deeper questions of existence. In his journals, he wrote about the struggle between what the world expects and what the soul requires. Your ego is experiencing something similar right now, but instead of being the emperor of Rome, you're probably just trying to figure out how to get motivated to update your LinkedIn profile or care about your quarterly performance review. The scale is different, but the internal conflict is identical. This is why everything feels so confusing right now. Your ego keeps trying to run the old programming. We should be working towards something. We need goals. What about our reputation? What will people think? How will we pay the bills if we don't care about success anymore? But awakening has introduced a completely different voice that says, none of that matters. There's something more important, but I can't explain what it is yet. It's like having 2 different radio stations playing at the same time in your head. The ego station is playing all your old favorite hits: anxiety about the future, regret about the past, comparison with others, fear of not being enough. But there's this other station that keeps bleeding through with a completely different frequency: presence, acceptance, trust, inner knowing. The problem is, you don't know how to tune into that second station consistently yet. So you're stuck between channels, getting static, feeling confused and unmotivated because neither frequency is coming through clearly enough to follow. This is why traditional motivational advice doesn't work for you anymore. It's designed for the ego station, but you're trying to tune into the soul station. It's like someone giving you directions in English when you've suddenly started thinking in a language you don't fully understand yet. The ego isn't going anywhere, it's going to learn to serve a different master. But right now it's in training, and training is always awkward and uncomfortable. You're literally learning how to be human in a completely different way. When the soul starts speaking, something subtle but significant is starting to shift inside you, and you might not even notice it at first. After weeks or months of feeling like you're floating in spiritual quicksand, there are these tiny moments, maybe just seconds at a time, where something deeper than your ego starts to whisper. Not with words but with feeling. Not with plans but with presence. This is your soul starting to come online as your primary operating system, and it's completely different from anything you've experienced before. The ego screams, the soul whispers. The ego demands, the soul invites. The ego pushes, the soul pulls. And right now, you're learning to hear a voice that's been trying to get your attention your entire life but was drowned out by the noise of external expectations and internal anxiety. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this transition beautifully. He described learning to distinguish between the voice of social conditioning and the voice of inner wisdom. He realized that true power doesn't come from controlling external circumstances, but from aligning with something deeper than personality, what he called the logos, the rational principle that governs the universe. But here's where it gets really interesting for you as an American navigating this shift. Our culture has trained us to mistake intensity for authenticity, loudness for truth, and urgency for importance. We're used to motivation that feels like adrenaline, goals that create anxiety, and dreams that keep us awake at night. So when soul-level guidance starts emerging, it can feel almost boringly quiet by comparison. You might find yourself drawn to things that don't make logical sense to your ego. Maybe you feel inexplicably pulled to spend more time in nature, even though you've never been particularly outdoorsy. Maybe you start craving solitude when you used to be social, or suddenly want to create something artistic when you've always been focused on practical matters. These aren't random impulses, they're your soul's way of recalibrating your entire system. After years of living from the outside in, trying to figure out what the world wants from you and then becoming that, you're starting to live from the inside out, asking what wants to emerge through you and then creating space for that. This is where the motivation starts coming back, but it feels completely different. Instead of being driven by fear of missing out, you're guided by what feels aligned. Instead of chasing external validation, you're following internal resonance. Instead of trying to prove yourself worthy, you're simply expressing what feels true. The wild part is that this new motivation is actually more effective than your old ego-driven system ever was. When you're aligned with your soul's agenda rather than fighting against it, everything flows more easily. You still work hard, but it doesn't feel like grinding. You still have goals, but they emerge naturally rather than being forced. You still care about outcomes, but you're not attached to them in a way that destroys your peace. Americans are taught to be suspicious of anything that doesn't feel like struggle. We've been programmed to believe that if it's not difficult, it's not valuable. If it's not stressful, we're not trying hard enough. If it comes naturally, it's probably not important. But soul-level living operates on completely different principles. Your soul doesn't care about your productivity metrics or your social media engagement or your net worth. It cares about authenticity, connection, growth, service, and love. And when you start orienting your life around these values instead of external achievements, everything changes. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop caring about practical matters. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in his world while simultaneously being one of the most spiritually evolved. The difference is that he learned to let his soul set the agenda and then use his ego as a tool to implement that agenda, rather than letting his ego set the agenda and forcing his soul to comply. You're learning to do the same thing. Your ego is being retrained to serve your soul instead of the other way around. And as this integration happens, motivation returns, but it's soul-powered motivation, which is sustainable, authentic, and aligned with who you really are rather than who you think you should be. The new fire, living from authentic motivation. The fire is back, but it's nothing like the old flame that used to drive you. This isn't the anxious energy that had you checking your phone every 5 minutes or the desperate hunger that made you compare yourself to everyone on social media. This is something older, deeper, and infinitely more powerful. The quiet confidence of someone who finally knows who they are and what they're here to do. You've probably noticed that you don't get excited about the same things anymore. The promotion that would have thrilled you last year feels meh. The vacation that used to be your dream destination seems unnecessary. The stuff you thought you wanted doesn't call to you anymore. But here's what's replaced all of that: a bone-deep sense of purpose that doesn't need external validation to sustain itself. This is what Marcus Aurelius discovered during his transformation from ambitious Roman politician to philosopher-emperor. He realized that true motivation doesn't come from wanting something you don't have, it comes from expressing something you already are. Instead of trying to become worthy through achievement, you start creating from worthiness. Instead of earning your place in the world, you claim it. The new motivation feels more like remembering than achieving. You wake up and instead of asking, "What do I have to do today?" you find yourself asking, "What wants to emerge through me today?" Instead of forcing your way through a to-do list, you follow a kind of inner compass that points toward what's alive, what's authentic, what's genuinely yours to contribute. And here's the beautiful irony. This soul-powered approach actually gets more done than your old ego system ever did. But now you're creating from joy rather than fear, from inspiration rather than desperation, from love rather than lack. The work doesn't drain you, it energizes you. The goals don't stress you out, they call you forward. Americans have been taught to hustle for their worth, but you're learning to create from your worth. We've been programmed to believe that if we work hard enough, we'll eventually deserve good things. But awakening taught you that you already deserve good things simply by existing, and now you work hard because you love what you're creating, not because you're trying to earn your right to be here. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or that you never face challenges. Marcus Aurelius dealt with plagues, wars, and political intrigue while maintaining his philosophical practice. The difference was that he faced these challenges from a place of inner stability rather than inner chaos. He didn't need external circumstances to be perfect in order to maintain his sense of purpose and direction. You're developing the same kind of unshakable core. Your motivation is no longer dependent on other people's opinions, market conditions, or perfect timing. It comes from something that can't be taken away from you: your soul's desire to express truth, create beauty, serve others, and grow into your fullest potential. The practical result is that you start making decisions differently. You say no to opportunities that look good on paper but don't feel aligned. You say yes to projects that excite your soul even if they don't make perfect logical sense. You trust your intuition in a way you never could before because you've learned to distinguish between ego desires and soul callings. This is why you went through that terrible motivational death phase. Your soul had to kill off all the false motivations so that the real one could emerge. It had to clear out all the borrowed dreams, inherited expectations, and culturally programmed goals so that your authentic purpose could finally have space to breathe. Now you're living what Marco Aurelius called the examined life. A life where every choice is filtered through the question, is this aligned with who I really am and what I'm really here to do? It's not easier than the old way, but it's infinitely more satisfying because you're finally playing your own game instead of trying to win at someone else's. The old fire burned you out. This new fire burns through you, transforming everything it touches into something more beautiful, more authentic, and more true. Welcome to your real life. It was worth the wait.